So welcome, listeners. We are back. It's MMA March Madness here on the Pottscast. This will be a bonus episode in March. Really excited to have this conversation. This is a conversation I've been trying to organize for a while. With both of our crazy schedules, it just hasn't really happened, but we've made it. It's happening right now. I'm joined on the line today by Kamuela Kirk. Kamuela, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for getting on the show.
Yeah. I'm glad we were able to make it work too, man. It's been kind of crazy. We've been trying to do this for what? A month?
Yeah,
something
at least.
Like that. At least.
Yeah, that's fun. It's fun. Glad to have you here. So what I'd like to do at the very, very start is, especially for my listeners, I have quite a lot of fans in the UK as well as Canada and America. And for maybe the guys that don't know you, just share a couple of stories or facts or things about yourself that maybe my guests wouldn't know.
My name is Kamuela Kirk. Nickname is the Jawaiian, which stands for Jamaican Hawaiian. I'm Jamaican by blood. My mom's side of the family is Jamaican, and I was born in Hawaii, have family out there. And so my dad gave me the nickname Jawaiian when I was a little kid, and it was something that always stuck. So that's kind of how the nickname came about. I first started training in jiu-jitsu when I was 4 years old. Had my first amateur MMA fight when I was 17. Which is crazy. It was actually 1 month after my 17th birthday. So it was March 13th, which means that May 13th, which means that May 13th this year will be 10 years since I had my first ever MMA fight, which is crazy to think about. And then I turned pro when I was about 20 years old, I believe, and have been, basically doing my thing since.
Mm-hmm. Crazy story. And one of the things I want to touch on there is you mentioned the bloodline, the Jamaican heritage and being born in Hawaii. Did you grow up in Hawaii then, or when did you come to the US to live in the mainland?
Yeah, the mainland. So no, I was real young when we left. I was only 2 years old when we left. Okay. I used to go back all the time. When I was a kid, I would try to go back every summer. I'd go stay with family for about a month over summer break. As you get older, it becomes a little bit more difficult as you have more responsibilities. It's hard to just, up and leave for a month. But yeah, my parents were young, when they had my sister and I, in Hawaii, and Hawaii is very expensive, so it was difficult for them being so young to raise two babies, two young kids, out in Hawaii. It was hard enough for them to afford to their own cost of living, much less with two kids. So my dad ended up going to school in Seattle. So the family moved to Seattle. I was 2 years old. My sister was 1. And we were in Seattle for about 3 years or so. And it was real cold and rainy all the time, and so my parents were basically like, well, what's the opposite of Seattle where it's cold and it's rainy? Arizona, where it's affordable and it's hot and it's dry. And so I was 5 years old. We came out here to Arizona, which is where, I currently still live, and we've been here ever since.
Interesting. Really interesting story. Arizona, pretty much, as you said, the desert of the US, effectively bordering with Nevada there in Vegas.
Yeah, it's funny, man. I've been watching, I heard that 75% of the nation, has been covered in snow. And here in Arizona, it's like, I mean, look at what I'm wearing right now. It's 75 degrees. It's perfect, so I can't complain. It's nice. What's cool about Arizona too is, we're 4 hours away from Vegas. We're 5 hours away from San Diego. Flagstaff, Arizona gets snow in the winter time. So, we're it's like a 2 hour drive if you want to go snowboarding. So Arizona's it's a pretty cool spot, man. Honestly, I don't think I would want to live anywhere else. I mean, of course, there's Hawaii. I love going back to Hawaii and being with family and going to the beach. It's the one thing Arizona doesn't have is a beach. But outside of Hawaii, man, I don't see myself living in any other state except Arizona, man. I really do like it here.
And it works for you for the fighting world. You know what I mean? Like if there's ever a late call up, a chance to fight, you're a couple of hours away from Vegas, where quite a lot of the cards happen too. Just that little asterisk star besides living in Arizona.
Oh, and there's so much talent out here, man. There's so many gyms here in Arizona. There's so many fighters that come out of Arizona. There are so many fighters, even from Hawaii, who actually moved down here to Arizona to train. So there are a lot of guys out here who move here, and then a lot of guys who move to Vegas as well to train. But this really it's a fantastic spot, man. If you're looking for good, technical, hard training and a spot, like a state to really elevate your game, Arizona's a great spot, man, for MMA.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about your journey in MMA now as well, not just really like your last fight and what's coming. I kind of like to go a bit more further back in time, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about your journey, because you said you made your debut at 17. If I told my parents at 17 years old I'm going to go and fight, I think
Yeah.
my parents would like lock the doors to the house and I wouldn't be allowed out. Obviously, doing a bit of research on you, you know, there's your family operates a gym, which we'll talk about.
Correct. Yeah,
We'll,
that's where I'm at right now. That's
we're in the
actually
gym.
why I asked. Yeah. So my family owns Siege MMA out here in Peoria, Arizona. That's actually why I asked you if we could push this interview back about 10 minutes, because I'm up at the front desk right now, and we have a Muay Thai kickboxing class that starts at 12. And so I was thinking about it. And I'm like, man, I don't want to be right in the middle of this interview, and then people are coming in, you know, checking in to go through that Muay Thai kickboxing class. So I'm like, let's wait like 10 minutes, and then once that class kind of gets going, I'll have a little bit more privacy up here at the front, and we can do the interview. But yeah, we own Siege MMA out here, and we opened up the gym back in 2007. I was 13 when we opened up the gym. So it's all family owned, man. We don't have any big money investors behind us. And so it's pretty awesome, man. We've been able to make it through some tough times. Now the gym's at a point where it's doing really well. But yeah, man, I'm very blessed to be able to have this spot, and you know, to be able to be here and call this home.
And the thing is too, you went unbeaten in your amateur career. You had 4 fights at amateur level. You started your first fight. You were just turned 17 years old. Did you have to get the blessing from the parents to be able to do that? Or was that kind of just a decision that you made and they just went, you know what, that's what you want to do? Fair enough. Like, talk to me about that bit of that time period in your life.
Yeah. So, you know, I so I started training when I was 4 years old. And the way I got into it was my dad and my uncle, they had been watching the UFC since the very, very first UFC, since UFC 1. And they saw this little Brazilian dude who was tapping everybody out named Royce Gracie. And, you know, at the time, there were no rules, no weight classes, and there wasn't really MMA. MMA was the sport, right? That you know, when the UFC started, they created MMA, and it was designed to see which martial art was superior, which martial art was the best. So you didn't have guys training in everything. You had guys training in jiu-jitsu, right? Royce. You had kung fu guys, kickboxers, you had boxers, you had wrestlers, and they put all those guys against each other to see which art was superior. And my dad and my uncle, they're watching, and they see this dude tapping everybody out in this martial art called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which they had never heard of. There's a funny story. My dad saw Royce hit a triangle choke on somebody in like the first or second UFC, and he was blown. It was like, he said it was like watching like a magician. He couldn't believe it. What did this guy do? He had this guy rolled up like a pretzel and used his legs to somehow choke, and the guy quit, and his mind was blown. And my dad said, I want to learn that, and I want my son to learn that as well. So that's kind of how we got going. We ended up, you know, finding a gym, and there weren't a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms at the time. Nobody really knew what it was. So we ended up finding a gym. I was 4 years old. Growing up, man, I had always played other sports too. So I didn't train in jiu-jitsu straight, you know, from the time I was 4. I did jiu-jitsu when I was 4, played other sports, kind of got back into jiu-jitsu again when I was 7, played other sports. And it wasn't until I was about 14 where I was like, okay, this is really what I want to do, and really dedicated myself to it. But I say all that to basically say it had been something that I grew up around. So my parents knew that I loved the sport. My family opened up the gym, so MMA is definitely a big part of our lives. So, you know, it was a part of the plan for me to fight. You know, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a fighter. So, in fact, after my sophomore year of high school, I talked to my parents and I said, hey guys, can I do online school? You know, that way I could just be at the gym. I can help run the family business during the day. I can train during the day because I want to fight. And to my surprise, they actually said, I thought they're going to, hell no, dude, you can't do online school, you know? And when I brought it up, they were real supportive. They said, look, if you do summer school online and you prove to us that you can do it, we'll let you do online school for your junior year. So I did online school, man, so I could focus on training. And when I turned 17, all my parents really had to do was basically sign a consent form saying that they were giving me permission because I wasn't yet of age to fight legally, you know, on my own. And they did. They signed the consent form to the commission or whatever, and I was able to make my debut at 17. But it was always something that was a part of the plan. And although my mom was incredibly nervous, she was confident in my abilities and supported me the whole time. And of course, my dad did too.
You see in those early years, because I find that fascinating at 17 years old, around 17, 18 years old, the drinking starts, the partying starts, the friends start, the chasing of women start, all that kind of stuff all begins around 16, 17, 18 years old. The fact that you
Yeah.
were fighting at that age, did that protect you a little bit? Or did you have a big sort of decision to make of, how do I balance my life with what I want to do? Or tell me just about those sort of adolescent years.
Yeah. So, I've always said that my parents have been like the bumpers, on a bowling alley for me. And they've always kept me in check. Anytime I start to get off track, man, they always bump me right back in line. And, I growing up, man, my dad and he would always instill in me, he's like, hey, listen, always stay focused on your goals. You're talented. I believe in you. You have the ability to really make something of yourself here. And he would always just instill in me, be focused, because everything that you think you want now at this young age, of course, like you said, the women, you want to be popular, the partying, all that kind of stuff. That'll all come once you've made it. A lot of people, they want to party when they're young and then they don't make anything of themselves. Or you see these people who are talented and then they hang out with the wrong crowd and then they never live up to their potential. So he always just encouraged me to stay focused, man. So I've actually, to this day, I've never been drunk. I've never had a drink. Never smoked. I've never been partying, even the few parties that I have gone to. I can count on one. I can count with probably 3 fingers, actually, the amount of parties that I've been to. And 2 of those are probably barbecues. And I'm always the guy who's drinking, water. You know what I'm saying? And I don't mind it. In fact, I've always said the first time I really party and I have a drink will be when I have a reason to celebrate. And that'll be after when I make my UFC debut and I get my first UFC win. So I've been saving my first drink for after I get my first UFC win. So when that day comes, which will hopefully be this year, I'll go out and I'll party and I'll have my first drink then. But yeah, so it was always easy for me, man. It was always easy for me to stay focused and just fighting was always priority number 1. In fact, and I think doing online school and being at the gym, being around this environment all the time, it actually kind of kept me away from all the high schoolers and all the college students and all the people who were partying. When they were out doing their thing, I was here in the gym doing my thing. So I kind of didn't have that influence all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very much tunnel vision.
Yeah.
You had that goal, you had that focus, and that's it for you. A lot of people have plan Bs and they maybe go to college on the side, or they maybe do this on the side, or they get a degree, or they're working in advertising, or they're working in real estate. For you, you're working from home. You're doing the school at home from such a young age. There is no plan B here. That's the vibe I'm getting. This is plan A, and this is what your life is about, and this is what you're about. What motivates you? What gives you that drive to want to succeed in this?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And you're absolutely right. I've had conversations with people who think that I'm crazy because I don't have a plan B, and they say, well, why don't you go to college? Why don't you just kind of make MMA like your side priority when you go to college and whatever else? And I go, side priority? No, like I'm all in. I'm all in, and yeah, there really is no plan B. And honestly, and a lot of people will probably disagree with me and think that this is an irresponsible mindset to have. But in a way, I feel like if there is a plan B, you're subconsciously giving yourself a way out, because you're telling yourself, if this doesn't work, this might not work. And that thought hasn't crossed my mind. There is no, if this doesn't work, it's just a matter of when it does work, whether it's this year or the next, it's going to work. It's just a matter of when. And yeah, as far, what was your other question, dude? I'm sorry, I went down a rabbit trail.
No worries at all. I was just curious about what motivates you. What is that driving factor every day to get up and want to do this?
Yeah, I'm ultra competitive. I hate to lose, man. I hate losing with a passion. And whatever it is that I set my mind to, it doesn't matter what it is. I want to be the best at it. If I set my mind to thumb wrestling, I would want to be the best thumb wrestler there ever was. And I would be watching YouTube videos and talking to people and figuring out all the techniques to make. It's just how I am, man. I have a little bit of an obsessive personality. And MMA was my vehicle. And I want to make something of myself. I want to live a great life. I want to one day when I'm on my deathbed, man, I want to look back and be proud of the decisions that I made. And like I said, MMA was the vehicle. So this is the thing that I'm all in on. And that's what motivates me, man, is I want to be able to accomplish what most people never are able to accomplish. You know, there are a lot of people who get into the sport. Very, 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 very small percentage of them ever even make it to the UFC. And a very, 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 very tiny percentage of the ones who make it into the UFC ever become champion. And I just want to defy the odds, man. And that's what motivates me.
I think it's interesting, you know, some of the points that you've made. I mean, if I look closer to home, where I'm from, Belfast in Northern Ireland, a big person for us is obviously Conor McGregor, right, who bet on himself when he was a plumber and said, I don't want to do this. I'm going all in MMA, and it's worked out for him. And to touch on another guy a little bit closer to home, someone that you faced in the octagon and you've actually beaten, it's someone who I previously chatted with. It was Kevin Croom. He got his chance in the UFC at 31 years old. He won his debut with a knockout, and I know he lost on Saturday night, but you know, at 31 years old, he got his chance. And I think one of the things which is so vital in this environment is something that you mentioned. It's when. And it's that state of preparedness. And how do you stay prepared to accept a fight in short notice? If the phone rings and says, hey, can you come fill this card on Saturday night in the UFC? There's these 3 title fights. We want you on this card. Somebody's pulled out. How do you stay prepared for pretty much when actually happens?
Yeah. So it kind of sounds corny, but you know, there's that saying, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. That's it, man. That's it. You know, I'm not the kind of guy who only trains during fight camp, you know. Sometimes, you know, there are some people like that where when there is no fight lined up, they're not really in the gym. I'm in the gym year round. This isn't a seasonal thing. This isn't just a fight camp thing for me. So after fights, I'll take a week, 2 weeks off, and I'm back in the gym. Now, I mean, there's a difference in intensity. I'm not training as hard as I am, you know, when I have a fight lined up, but I'm still in the gym. I'm still sharpening my tools. I'm still staying in shape. It might not be fight shape, but I'm still in shape. That way, when I do get that call, I am ready. In fact, I've had the call about 5 or 6 times where I have been this close to actually getting into UFC, where my managers will call and they'll say, hey, somebody pulled out. Are you ready? And I've said yes. And unfortunately, they've ended up picking, you know, they've gone with other people in these different scenarios for various reasons. But I've always been able to say, yes, I'm ready. If you need somebody, I'm ready. So again, like we talked about, it's a matter of time. It's a matter of when. You know, one of these times I'm going to get that call and it'll be me who gets accepted as long as I'm ready when I do get that call. So you stay ready. You don't have to get ready. Even if you're not training as hard as you do in fight camp, be in the gym, be training, be in shape. And then you don't have to turn down those opportunities when they arise.
You've mentioned about being ready. Physically, you're ready. You know, I know you fight at featherweight. Just quickly, what weight do you walk around at? And then secondly, I want to touch on, you're ready mentally, you're ready physically. I want to touch on being ready mentally. Because the mental aspect of this game must be so tough. When you've said, yeah, I'm ready, you've answered the phone call and they go with someone else. Mentally, how do you get over those hurdles? Or do you just keep doing what you're doing and you just trust the process that the time will come?
Yeah. Yeah. So in the beginning, it was more mentally a bigger deal. Like the first time I got the call, you know, I'll never forget it. It was a week and a half before my sister. So my sister, she fought one time. She had an amateur fight. This is like 5 years ago. And it was like a week and a half before her fight. I remember this because when I got the call, it was actually going to be the fight in the UFC on the same night that she was making her amateur debut. And my manager calls me, and I was actually taking a nap. I was sleeping, and he called, and I missed the first call, and then he called me again, and I look, and I'm like, oh shoot, man, like he just called me twice. And so I pick it up, and I'm thinking this must be important. First thing he says to me is, "What's your weight?" And I'm, you know, the only reason why somebody's asking what's your weight is because there's a fight coming up, right? That's the only reason. And so I sit up and I'm like, oh, my weight is, I don't remember what it was. And he goes, could you make 145 by next Friday for weigh-ins? And I'm like, yeah, what's going on? Remember, I'm just waking up, so I'm trying to process all this. I'm like, yeah, man, what's going on? And he goes, you might be making your UFC debut next Friday or next Saturday. And man, I was just, you know, again, I'm just waking up. I'm trying to process everything. all these emotions, man, just over. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. And then I start thinking about my sister, and I'm like, dude, this is amazing. I'm like, this is crazy because my sister makes her amateur debut next Saturday as well. I'm like, damn. And he goes, oh, I'm sure she would understand if you had to miss her fight to make her UFC debut. And I'm like, oh, yeah, of course. But I'm like, dude, this is crazy. Yeah. And I remember getting off the phone, and I tell my dad, I'm like, Dad. And he's like, what's up? And I think, like I said, this is about 5 years ago or so. So I was 20, 21, something like that. And he's like, what's up? And I'm like, Dad, I might be making my UFC. And dude, and like, as I'm saying this, I kind of started getting emotional a little bit, man, because this is like, I first started training when I was 4, did it on and off, and until I was about 14. And then I did online school and the family. I mean, I've dedicated a lot of time into this sport, man. And so that moment, as I said it out loud, I'm like, Dad, I might be making my UFC debut next Saturday. Dude, I kind of broke down a little bit. And then my dad is like, no way, man. And he kind of broke it. And we had like a moment for like 5 seconds, and then we got it together. Like we hugged, and we're like, oh man, okay. All right, we're good. Okay. All right, breathe. Hey, we're good. And it was this huge deal. And then I ended up not getting it. But just the fact that I was even considered was amazing, you know? And then on and off, that kind of happened. Like I said, over the years, it's happened like 5 or 6 times. So at this point, you know, in the beginning, when I first got it, it was almost like, this is too good to be true. I can't believe that this is real, right? It was just the most surreal feeling. To now, I get that call and I'm expecting it. You know what I mean? So now when I get the call and I'm being considered, it's like, of course I'm being considered. You know, it's a difference in like, I can't believe it, to now it's like, I absolutely 100% believe it. And now it's just a matter of when I actually get accepted, and I am that guy. And I know that mentally, spiritually, physically, I've filled in a lot more, even now than I did 5 years ago. I'm actually happy that I didn't get accepted 5 years ago, because even though if you would have asked me then, I would have told you I was ready, I don't think I actually was. But now it's a completely different state of mind, and I'm ready when I do get that call, you know. But mentally, yeah, it has been a hurdle, especially in the beginning, but now I'm ready for when it does happen.
Well, you obviously seem ready, and I want to talk about a little bit about the journey that got you ready. So specifically, you done 4 amateur fights, you won them all, and then you went pro. Obviously, given your upbringing and beginning to fight at 17, the goal was to always go professional. Was there ever a moment after those 4 amateur fights you went, now is the time to go pro? How did that decision to become professional actually come about?
Yeah. So I actually, I know it doesn't show up on my record, but I had 6 amateur fights. 2 of them, one of them was a smoker, so I know that's not, you know, they don't count that by the commission. I don't know what happened with the other one, but I fought 6 times before turning pro, and I beat everybody in the first round except for one. I finished in the second round, and basically my coach at that point was like, you know, this dude's been, you know, people have an amateur career because they're trying to get experience right before turning pro. I had grown up competing in jiu-jitsu from, you know, I first competed in jiu-jitsu when I was 7 years old, and, you know, competed whenever I was training, I was competing. I won the world championships twice in the juvenile division, one time in gi, one time in no gi for IBJJF, which is the most respected jiu-jitsu organization in the world. So I had so much competition experience. Competing was nothing new to me. And there really wasn't anybody on the amateur scene, who was really challenging me. And so it was after my last amateur fight, in my last amateur fight, I took my guy down and I had his back, and my coach was yelling at me not to finish the fight. He goes, don't finish the fight. I didn't realize that's what I could barely hear him. I heard he was yelling something, and I guess I didn't notice until afterwards, but he was saying, don't finish the fight. Don't finish the fight. Because he wanted me to have more cage time. He wanted me to have more cage experience. And I had beaten everybody else in the first round. Like I said, one person in the second. He just wanted me to like let the guy go just so that the fight, we could just keep fighting, just for nothing more than experience. I ended up choking the dude, and he was like, dude, I was telling you not to finish the fight, which is such a funny conversation to have with your coach afterwards. You know, I was telling you not to win right there, you know, not yet. And what up, dude? And so afterwards, he goes, man, he's like, it's time for you to go pro. He's like, there's just nobody here who's really challenging you at this level. Let's go pro. You know, and then fortunately enough, things continued. I you know, have won, I think 9 out of my 10 wins have come in the first round. So it's been good, man. But yeah, that was kind of my amateur career. And it was after that, my coach goes, all right, dude, you're ready for that. You're comfortable in there. You have plenty of competition experience, and technically, you know, skill set wise, you're ready for the next level.
And even at that next level, having, you know, researched for this podcast and watched some of your fights and stuff, and I wanted to bring this up a little bit later, but I think now is a very good opportunity. There's 4 defeats in your professional record. 3 of them, in my opinion, are very highly questionable decision making. And I wanted to know sort of your thoughts on that, not so much just on the decision perhaps being wrong, but when that decision is wrong, is there a mental hurdle for you to overcome? Or is it just very much like, I know I won that, or I know I done better than they said I done, whatever, just on to the next one?
Man, yeah. So it's a little bit of both. There definitely is a mental hurdle, you know, because, you know, again, like I said earlier, man, I dedicate my whole life to this sport. Everything from, again, like never even had a drink, right? Very, very focused, very dedicated. And then to put in the work and the time and the energy in a fight camp, you know, to deal with the injuries and pushing through that, and just the grind that comes with this sport, only to go out and perform and do my job, and then with every ounce of my being feel like I won a fight. And not just myself, but when my coaches feel like I won the fight, and I'm getting messages from complete strangers who had watched the fight who are telling me, man, I'm so sorry you got robbed. I watched your fight last weekend and I completely thought that you won. You know, man, it is really difficult because I feel like something was literally stolen from me. Like they might as well have broken into my house and taken my possessions. Like that's how I feel. So I'd be lying, man, if I told you that there wasn't a little bit of a mental hurdle to get through. And especially because as I'm climbing and trying to get into the UFC, man, you know, a loss, especially from a decision that you thought that you won, a loss like that, man, could set you back 2-3 fights. You know, you could be on a 2 to 3 fight win streak and be right there where you're getting those calls to potentially get in the UFC, and then you lose a split decision, and now you're not getting those calls anymore. And it's happened to me multiple times now. You stop getting those calls. And then you got to get back on another 2 to 3 fight win streak. And then, you know, you're trying to do that while staying healthy and not getting injured in the gym, you know, and dude, it's very, very challenging. So, but if you dwell, and then that takes you to the flip side, if you dwell on that, then that's going to set you back too, just in your own mind. So then a part of you is like, okay, what's done is done. We can't change that. Now it's just time to reshift our focus and move forward, because that's all we can do. But that's definitely easier said than done.
Another fighter I was talking to in the podcast, and I'll be out later this month, was Smiling Sam Alva, UFC fighter, and he made sort of the comment as well about the decision making of judges, because not only does it affect that fighter, it affects a paycheck, it affects potential paychecks coming in the future, it affects going forward in your career. You literally just said it could affect maybe another year of your life to do another 2 to 3 fights. And one of the suggestions he had, and he credits it to Joe Rogan, he sort of said there should be more than 3 judges, because it only takes 2 people to be questioned. I'm not sure about that. And all of a sudden, somebody's dream or somebody's career for another year is put on hold. You know, whether it be 5 judges, 10 judges, the likelihood of the decision being wrong lessens dramatically with more judges. And I was curious on maybe your opinion on how we could help fix those issues, because there have been so many fights where it's affected a paycheck, it's affected a win streak, it's even affected a title fight, it's affected somebody's life based on 2 people's opinion, and that opinion just being wrong.
Yeah, man. And this happens so often. And it's frustrating to see. It's always bad too when people who have zero emotional tie to the fighter, you know, who don't know them on a personal level, and then they watch the fight, and then even they're like, man, that was horrible. I feel bad for that guy. You know, that's how you know it's really bad. And we've seen some horrible calls. Yeah, maybe more judges, maybe 5 judges. Maybe that's the answer. You know, or maybe that would help. I think that these judges need to have some sort of training experience, in my opinion. You know, a lot of these guys have never trained or stepped foot into an MMA gym in their lives. And then they have these fighters lives and careers in their hands, you know, when they're making these calls, not knowing entirely what they're even looking at, right? I also think that they should be held accountable. You know, I made a video a while back, and I talked. It was actually after one of my losses, and this was just weighing on my mind. I wanted to talk a lot about the poor judging in MMA, and so I kind of vented in this video. And one of the things that I had said, and I stand by this, is I would like for the judges to go to the press conferences, man. You know, so that at the end of the night, people can ask him, "Hey, why did you give the fight to so and so? What did they do in your eyes to win that fight?" You know, especially when there are questionable calls. And if they don't want to do that, okay, then show up to the rules meeting with the fighters. You know what I mean? And talk to the fighters. And as judges, referees do this. Referees will they'll have either all the fighters together, and they'll talk about what the referees are looking for. The rules meeting, they'll talk about the rules. And they'll have either all the fighters together, or in the back, you know, when you're getting taped up or whatever, you're getting your hands wrapped, the referees will come and they'll talk to you individually, and they'll say, "Hey, listen, I'm reffing your fight tonight. This is what I'm looking for. You know, make sure you do this, this, and that. If I see this, then I may stop the fight, blah, blah, blah." But they're very clear with you before you ever go in there, what it is that they're looking for. And I wish it was the same with the judges. I wish the judges would say, "Guys, this is what we're looking for. This is how we're scoring the fight." That way, everybody's on the same page beforehand, because right now there's just no standard. So multiple times, man, there have been times where I thought that I was winning a fight, only to have the other guy, you know, only have the referee raise the other guy's hand at the end of the night, man. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. The other thing too is I would like, and they're starting to do this in some places, like in Kansas, for example. In Kansas, which is where I just fought, they're actually showing the cornermen the scores of the judges in between rounds, which is really, really nice. MMA is one of the only sports where it's like you don't know where you're at in the judge's eyes. In basketball, you know exactly what the score is at all times, right? In football, in hockey, in baseball, whatever, you always know what the score is, so you know how to make your adjustments. In MMA, it's not like that. But certain places like Kansas, they're going up to the cornerman. They're saying, "Hey, your fighter won this round, or your fighter lost this round. This is what the judges said." And then the cornerman can tell their fighters accordingly, "Okay, this is what we need to do. We're either down or we're up," but it's clear and everybody knows where we're at. I love that. And I think that would make a huge difference as well if all the commissions start to adopt that same rule.
I agree, because it also would even lead into an entertainment factor. You know, for example, get into that fifth round. If someone knows they're down, they're going to come out swinging. They're going to come out, you know, they need that knockout or they're beat. You know what I mean? And I think that would help that entertainment factor as well. It helps that accountability factor. And I think accountability is the big one. I would enjoy the judges being at press conferences, whether they be even being asked questions by the fighters, or even if they're just in the crowd, that the fighter has a chance to say, "Hey, you scored this 10-8. Why did you score this 10-8?" Etc. I think that will be a big one. But moving on to a bit more about this year for you. Your last fight was in January. You beat Guilherme Santos. I think that's how I pronounced it correctly. Guilherme Santos. That was a big win for you. So what's next? What's next in this year for you?
Well, right now we're just kind of playing it by ear. I actually got a call, so I got another one of those calls to step in and fight against Rafael Alves, I believe his name is, the dude who just missed weight. He just missed weight by what did they say? He just broke the record on like the biggest weight miss in UFC history.
Was that the 11-pound one? 11.
Yeah, 11. Yes. So his opponent backed out for whatever reason. I don't know if he got hurt or what, but they needed somebody to fill the spot. And my manager actually called me, and I was very, very close to getting that fight against Rafael. Now, it ended up not happening. They ended up signing somebody else, but either way, it ended up not happening because he missed weight, obviously. But yeah, I was this close to actually getting that fight. So the last win, it was real big for me. And it definitely, you know, I'm back on the radar again, which is nice. And again, you know, either maybe I fight again in LFA, or maybe I don't need to. Maybe I just get another call and I step up on a short notice opportunity to fight in the UFC. But I do believe that this is the year that I get into the UFC. It's just a matter of, do I need to fight for LFA again, or do I get that call because somebody backs out? So like I said, so right now I'm in that position where it's like, I got to stay ready so I don't have to get ready. So when I get that call, I can say yes, and I'm good to go.
You've mentioned LFA, you've mentioned UFC. Would Bellator or PFL or anything be on the horizon for you? Would you accept anything along that line, or is it very much the LFA UFC route that you're very much concentrated on?
Very, very much concentrated on getting into UFC. Yep.
Yeah. The big card this weekend. It's going to be a very, very big card. I'm excited for that one. But just keeping it sort of a bit closer to home for you. You know, you've mentioned your family. I want to know about your support system, the key people in your life that help you do what you do, specifically maybe even the gym, your trainers, your coaches.
Yeah. So of course, my family, my parents, my sister, she's a huge help as well. My brother, he's a huge help as well. My sister, she helps me out with a lot of the behind the scenes things, like before COVID and everything, and LFA would come to town, and fighters, they would have the opportunity to sell tickets and get a percentage of the ticket sales. My sister was basically handling all the ticket sales, so I didn't have to worry about it at all. So, things like that. When I would get T-shirts made and finding sponsors and things like that, my sister was a huge help. My brother trains as well. So when I need classes covered, because I coach here at the gym too, he would step up and he would coach my classes. So my family, all of us were very much involved, and all of them, they have my back. My step parents included, they're great. And then my coaches, man, my coaches are I look at them, they're family as well. My head coach, Santino DeFranco, he's always got my back. I've been working with him since I was 19 years old. But yeah, man, between my family, my coaches, my teammates, just my close circle. I don't have a huge circle, it's pretty tight. And I like it like that. I prefer it to be a tight circle with people that I love and trust, who have my best interests at heart. And yeah, man, I know that they got my back, and being around them is reassuring for me, because I have confidence that, hey, everybody's doing their absolute best, and I trust everybody. But yeah, man, that's my support system between my teammates, my family, my coaches.
You're not the first fighter that said they like to keep it small. And I think that's always good, because you can be real raw and sort of emotional and tell people exactly what's going on. Something you mentioned, that you train in the gym, you're also coaching in the gym, you're taking classes and things like that. Talk to me about the difference between training generally and when you're in a fight camp, because I want to get on to just when you prepare for an opponent and what actually happens when we get into the cage. So tell me first just a little bit about the differences in training between a camp and just keeping yourself in shape all year round.
Yeah. So it's actually changed up quite a bit over the last, I would say, two to three camps, probably really the last two camps. Things have really switched up for me, because what I used to do is I used to train hard outside of camp, and then I would train incredibly hard in camp, and I would be training twice a day, 3 times a day, and I would go home and I would just feel dead tired. I would feel completely run down, and then I'd be like, oh, but I got a fight coming up, I gotta go run, even though I've already trained 2 to 3 times today and I'm dead tired, I gotta go run. And what I noticed was I would just run myself down, man, and then come fight night, I was just a fraction of who I should be, of the fighter that I am. Just because physically, and then going through the weight cut on top of that, man, it was very taxing on my body. Over the last 2 to 3, but mostly 2 fight camps, I've kind of taken a different approach. I'll train hard outside of camp. I'll spar hard outside of camp. And even that, I'm really toning down how often I'm sparring hard. I remember hearing Forrest Griffin say, save the fighting for fight night. And man, that really stuck with me. And I'm like, yeah, why do we beat ourselves up? Why do we rock each other in the gym? Why are we, why I've been injured far more from training than I ever have been in an actual fight. Why is that? And so I've really kind of lowered down the intensity of sparring. Wrestling, we can wrestle hard, we can roll hard in jiu-jitsu, we can drill hard, we can do hard strength conditioning, hard bag work. But there's no need to take those hard shots to the head, hard shots to the body. There's no need to continue to chop yourself down. Max Holloway actually just said in an interview, and you probably know what I'm talking about. I think it was Below the Belt with Brendan Schaub or one of those interviews. And he had said something like, man, I was sparring so hard that I felt like instead of being a knife in the fight, I felt like I was showing up with a butter knife instead of a sharp knife. And it's like, man, yes, that's so true. I felt like that so many times. So the last 2 camps, man, strength and conditioning hardcore, wrestling, jiu-jitsu hardcore. I've done almost no sparring for my last 2 fight camps. What I'll do is I'll move with training partners. I'll move. I'll have them kind of throw at me, and I'm making sure that my timing is there. We'll drill different things. but it's like playing tag, man. It's like touch sparring. You know what I mean? Making sure that I'm seeing things. And as long as my timing is there, my eyes are there, and I'm seeing everything that's coming at me, and I don't have to take that physical abuse that comes with hard sparring. And going into fights, I feel like how I do in the gym, which I never used to feel that way. I never used to feel as good in a fight physically as I would in the gym. And over the last couple of camps, I felt that way. And there's a night and day difference, man. And I believe everything happens for a reason. Maybe the reason why I never got accepted before when I had those close calls to the UFC, or why I've had some of these split decision losses, is because maybe I would have gotten into UFC and my weight cut wasn't quite there yet. My reload wasn't quite there yet. I didn't have my training dialed in yet during fight camp. And now everything's dialed in, man. And I feel so much better. And there's a huge confidence that comes with that as well. So that's the main difference, man. When I have a fight coming up now, I'm doing things way more intelligently. It's the whole working smarter, not harder. Doesn't mean that I'm not working hard, but I'm not killing myself, so that when I show up on fight night, I feel fresh.
It's interesting you mentioned the Max Holloway thing. He really has caused a lot of waves with that, with his sort of comments recently in the past sort of year of how he's adjusted his training. Even his latest interview last week with Joe Rogan, he's talking about he doesn't even spar anymore before a fight, because there's no point taking that damage. And I think it's going to change, I think, the way a lot of people prepare for fights. And the next question I have for you, and this is always an interesting one for me, having been someone who's trained a little bit in kickboxing and done a little bit of Muay Thai and just maybe an armchair fan, for you guys that actually step into that octagon and fight, I want to know how much of it is actually you preparing for your opponent, or are you just naturally reacting to things as they happen in the cage? That's always fascinated me in that aspect.
Yeah. So, there's a little bit of both. Normally what I do is I will watch like 30 seconds of my opponent. Like, no joke. Like, I'll watch like 30 seconds of my opponent, and that's it. Like, once I've seen what I need to see, that's it. And then after that, man, it's like I'm just confident in my abilities. Man, I train everything. I train my boxing. I train my Muay Thai kickboxing. I train my wrestling. I train my jiu-jitsu. I train top position, bottom position, working off my back, cage wrestling, front. I mean, everything. We do that so much that I'm not going to be put in a position that I have not seen before. And by people who are even better than my opponents. My opponent might have me in a position, and I've been there a million times by people who are better versions of them there. You know what I mean? So it's like, I know I'm going to be prepared. I'll watch 30 seconds of footage. A lot of times too, I like to watch my opponent lose. So if I'm fighting somebody and they have a couple losses, I want to watch how do they lose. And I just like seeing them lose. I like visualizing them losing. And yeah, after 30 seconds of just kind of seeing how they move, trying to pick up on little tendencies like, oh, this person's throwing 2 kicks and every time they do, they drop their hands. Or this person, they have a tendency of they've thrown a couple jabs, and when they throw the jab with the left, they drop their right hand. Okay, that check hook is going to be money. Whatever. Once I've seen what I need to see, that's it. I turn it off. And then after that, man, it's all just focusing on myself and just making sure I'm healthy, I'm strong, and I'm sharp. You know what I mean? I'm ready to go.
I think that's the key one, isn't it? Healthy, strong, ready to go. When you're going in there, you're obviously trained enough to be confident enough in your abilities. A couple more questions around the actual fight for you. Then I have a couple of what I call fan submitted questions from a few of my friends who are MMA fans, and these are always quite good fun, I think. But when you're getting ready for the fight, when you're backstage, I say backstage as if it's like a WWE production, when you're in the back and getting your hands wrapped and getting ready to go, what's going through your mind?
Man, that's a good question. Man, I'm big on visualizing. I before my last fight, man, I saw what happened in my last fight a million times before I ever fought. Even the body shot, I knew that, hey, when I heard him, I want to find the body shot. I rocked him. He was stumbling back against the cage. I framed on him, and boom, I threw that left shot to the body, and it was actually that shot that folded him. But I saw that a million times in my mind. When I'm in the back, I'm getting my hands wrapped up. I'm visualizing the walkout. I'm visualizing my music playing. I'm visualizing my opponent's throwing at me, and I'm reacting accordingly, and I'm countering. And it's just, I try to see it in my mind just again and again and again and again and again, so that when I'm in there, I'm not thinking. It's just, I've been here before. Dude, it's like when you watch a movie that you've seen and you can quote the words, you know, because you've seen the movie so often. You don't got to think about it. You're like, oh, I know what's going to happen. And you're quoting the dialogue. You're quoting that's how it is, man. You see it so many times that when you're in there, man, it's like, I've been here. I've done this. This is a movie that I've already seen. I already know the ending. And yes, it's a lot of visualization, man, before I go out there.
I love that. I love the visualization. That's what I try to do with this podcast. I visualize it getting bigger and bigger and bigger and pray
Absolutely.
that it gets bigger and bigger.
That's good, man.
Another one for you. We'll move into the fan submitted questions after this one. The weight cut, right? Because you've mentioned your last couple of training camps have been different. They've been better. You feel fresh going in. You've changed how you prepare. Have you noticed the weight cut is easier as a result, that you're not as banged up and not as tired going into the fight week?
Yes. So, man, I used to be one of those guys who just completely starved myself before fighting, to make weight. I remember, man, like I used to, like days, like the week of the fight, I used to basically eat nothing but like a handful of banana chips. And, those Ensure drinks, they're like this big, and, they're meal replacement drinks. I would have like one or two of those a day. And then I would have like a handful of banana chips. And then I would just barely drink any water. I wouldn't really eat any other food besides the banana chips. And oh my gosh, it was just miserable. And then I just felt like a shell of myself on fight night. But again, I didn't know any better. I just always thought, this is just how it is. Like, this is how you feel on fight night, and this is how you make weight. Over time, I've obviously done things a lot better. I've educated myself a lot more. I've worked with different people. And now what I do is, instead of trying to lose a bunch of weight the week of the fight by starving myself and dehydrating myself, about 4 to 5 weeks out, I'll really start to diet, and really control what I'm eating and the portions. And then over time, it's a much more comfortable way of making weight, because you just gradually start to lose the weight, as opposed to trying to lose it all over the course of a few days. So that feels way better on my body. And then the reload too, which in my opinion is arguably even more important than the weight cut. Anybody can kill themselves to make the weight. It's how do you get everything back after you step off the scale. And we've really dialed that in, where I'm putting on a lot of weight, but not too much weight, where I feel sluggish. But I feel strong. I don't feel fatigued. I don't feel tired. It's just in time, man. In time, you get better at things. Like you said, with this podcast, in time you're growing, you trial and error, right? And you dial things in. And that's how we are now with dieting out for the cut. And then we have a reload system that's just money. It's just working really well.
That reload system, it's something I've never heard mentioned before from all the different people I've spoken to, about the weight cut and the weight cut's tough. That reload thing, that reload time period must be so, so important. And I think it's probably something that's glossed over a lot when people talk about weight cut, the scales and getting in. Though that sort of 24 hours after you get off that scale before you get on is probably so vitally key.
Oh, it is, man. It is. Yeah, it's funny that we're talking about this, actually, because I was just talking to my boxing coach about this like 2-3 days ago. We were talking about the reload, and we were saying how it's probably more important than the weight. I would rather have, let me put it like this, I would rather have a bad weight cut and a great reload than a great weight cut and a bad reload. I mean, we have it so dialed in, like down to a schedule where it's like, okay, 20 minutes between the time you step off the scale and the first 20 minutes, this is what you're taking and this is what you're consuming. From the 20-minute mark to the 1 hour mark, this is what you're consuming. So, I mean, it's a schedule. This is what we're doing. So we're not just winging it. And it's just been working wonders, man. It's been amazing.
Really, really good to hear. And it leads me on really perfectly to the first submitted question. And this is a very popular one that always comes up. Do you have a favorite cheat meal?
It's everything, man. Everything is my favorite. I love food, man. I love food. I'm probably the least picky person that you've ever had on this podcast, which makes, weight cuts really, really difficult, because it makes weight cuts difficult, but it also makes weight cuts easy, because even when I'm cutting weight, I love the foods that I'm, even when I'm dieting down, I should say, I love the foods that I'm eating. But man, I have so many cravings. Dude, favorite weight cut. It's funny because or favorite cheat meal rather. Every weight cut I crave something different. Like the last time, for some reason, dude, sub sandwiches, like a chicken bacon ranch, like sub sandwich from Jersey Mike, dude. Like that was what I was craving. Before that, I used to crave breakfast croissants with like sausage and bacon, and like that was the thing. Dude, I love pasta, man. Italian food, pizzas, pasta. Dude, it's just asking me to choose like my favorite cheat meal would be like asking me to choose like my favorite child. I don't have kids yet, but it'd be like asking me to choose like my favorite child. I would imagine like that's an impossible task. Except this is probably even harder. I love all foods, man. I can't decide.
Brilliant. See, you got me hungry now.
Me too.
As another question that I love asking people, and it seems to come up quite often, who's your favorite inspiration? Do you have a favorite fighter or a favorite coach or someone maybe when you were a kid that inspired you? For example, for me, it was Brock Lesnar. I was WWE fan. Lesnar went into UFC and that got my head turned. So I always go back to Brock Lesnar. For you, who would you be your inspiration growing up?
Yeah, that's awesome. So Brock Lesnar was the one that got you into this sport. It made you a fan of MMA.
Yeah, pretty much. I was a huge WWE fan, always have been since sort of the Rock, Steve Austin, 97, 98. And then when Brock came in early 2000s, then when Brock went to UFC, I was like, oh, what's this? And that was sort of my sort of entryway in the UFC.
That's awesome, man. It's so cool to hear how people came into the sport, you know, what turned them on to MMA. That's awesome. For me, it would without a doubt be my father. It'd be my dad. My dad's my best friend. We're so close. He's the one that got me into the sport. Like I said, you know, when I was 4 years old, he watched UFC 1 and he goes, I want to learn that. And I want my son doing that too. You know, it was my dad's idea to open up the gym. We've always just been extremely close. It was really cool, actually. My dad was in my corner for my last. My dad has always been in my corner for all of my fights, except for not my last fight, but the fight before. The fight before, we were only allowed one corner man because of COVID. So my head MMA coach, Santino DeFranco, he was of course he had to be my head MMA coach. He was there. But my dad had always been in my corner before that. It had always been Santino and my dad. And then that was the first fight ever that my dad, couldn't make because of COVID. Well, for my last fight, my coach ended up getting COVID, so he couldn't go out with me for the fight. So it was just my dad. So it was the first time ever that it was just my dad in my corner. But I would want nobody else there. If Santino couldn't be there, then my dad was the next option, man. I wouldn't want anyone else in my corner. So my dad and I are very close. He's the guy that he's you asked me what motivates me, man. I want my dad to be able to look at me one day. I want to be able to make it, and I want my dad to just be just so incredibly proud. And I know he's already proud, but I just want to I want my dad to be like, that's my son. You know what I mean? He made it. He did what he said he was going to do. Another inspiration that I had growing up, man, was BJ Penn. Dude, when I was younger, I used to watch BJ Penn highlights every single day, every day. And I would come home from school, I would watch BJ Penn highlights, and I would go to the gym and I would try to emulate BJ Penn from the way that he boxed, how he would grab people behind the head and he would throw the uppercuts, and the way he would take people's backs and he would trap the arm with his leg and then choke them out. And, he was a huge inspiration of mine on the MMA side. So between those two would be my dad, and then as a kid, BJ Penn.
One of the all-time greats of BJ Penn, and obviously your dad. And I think it's really, really cool because the family business, your dad's influenced you. He's been in your corner. It's so cool. And another question I have, and it's going to be a hint at my wife, because when we do have kids, I've sort of advocated, let's get them involved in some type of martial art. And for you started jiu-jitsu at 4 years old. And would you have a specific martial art that if a young person or a child was beginning to start their journey that you would kind of push them towards? Is there one that you think is better than the others? Not so much better, but maybe better in terms of the discipline and the aspect for children, and or maybe even just what's your favorite discipline or different type of martial art?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll go for kids. I would say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm sure you're probably expecting me to say that. But the reason why I say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is because in Jiu-Jitsu, you learn a little bit of takedowns. Of course, it's not as takedown heavy as wrestling, but you do learn your basic single legs, your double legs, your trips. So kids will learn how to take somebody down. They'll learn how to defend takedowns. They'll learn their sprawls, their back takes. But what's really important is they'll learn how to get up off of their backs. If they get put on their backs, They'll know either how to submit from their backs, they have to throw up an arm bar or a triangle, or they'll know how to reverse the position. That way they can get on top. And I think that that's really important. It's funny that you asked me this, actually, because I just talked to a kid yesterday who had a friend, a young kid, I think he's 11, he's in 5th or 6th grade. And he had a buddy of his who was getting bullied, then got beaten up by this bully. And then this bully had tried to mess with our kid here and actually punched him in the face. And our kid ended up taking him down, and he ended up getting on top and then arm barring the kid. You know, so of course, man, we don't ever advocate starting fights, but part of the reason why I think it's important for every kid to have some base of a martial arts background is in cases like that where they need to defend themselves or others. And he was able to use his jiu-jitsu to defend himself. But we have, several stories like that of kids being able to defend themselves from bullies. So I think that, jiu-jitsu is the martial art for kids. Also, 9 out of 10 fights all end up on the ground at some point in time. So it's important that they know what to do and that they're comfortable when the fight gets there. As far as what my favorite martial art is, I've been doing jiu-jitsu the longest. I love jiu-jitsu, but man, I love striking too. Like, I love striking. I really, really do. So it's kind of hard, man. I just love fighting. I just love the game. So it's hard for me to choose one. I know I'm not giving you the best. Like with food, I'm like, I love so many food. With martial arts, I'm like, I just love fighting, but it's true.
It's the truth, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're here for. We're here to figure out and learn a little bit more about you. And hopefully when this podcast goes, when the YouTube channel goes, that's what people take from this. They learn more about you and they want to get behind you. Another one, I love asking people this one, and actually someone else submitted this, not me this time, which is great. If life was a video game and you could have and hand pick your opponent, and it could be any fighter from any time period in any sport, who would you like to fight? And I'm going to add to that, and I'm going to ask, and what arena would you like to fight them in? So almost like fantasy book your favorite, who would you love to fight and where?
I would love to fight. Man, that's a really good question, man. A part of me is like, I would love to fight Connor, right? Because that's the big money fight. That is probably the fight that the most people, you're gonna get the most eyes on that fight, so you're gonna get the most exposure from that fight. And I would love to fight him in Hawaii. That would be awesome. It would be awesome to fight him in Ireland as well, because I went to Ireland once because he's just he's a superstar. To fight him and to beat him in front of his crowd, I love that. I love fighting people in front of their hometowns too. Yeah, I actually went to Ireland once. I cornered a buddy of mine who fought what's his name? Conor McGregor's teammate, Bellator 35er, Gallagher.
Dylan Dennis? No,
not Dylan Dennis, the Irish kid.
It's not James Gallagher. No.
Yes,
it is James. Yeah.
Anyway, so I cornered my teammate Ramon Salazar. So this is the cool thing about. I'm going on a tangent here, but this is the cool thing about MMA is the opportunities, man. You never know what could happen. I woke up to a text message from my coach one morning, random morning. It was on a Wednesday. And it goes, "Do you have your passport?" And I was like, "Ooh." He's asking me this because obviously, like, there's some traveling that's about to go down. So I'm like, "I do have my passport." He goes, "Hey, he goes, he was busy already. We had a bunch of teammates who were fighting on that weekend. Like all over. We had someone fighting in California. We had someone fighting in Canada. And then my boy Ramon, my teammate, he got a call to fight in the main event against James Gallagher in Ireland for Bellator. So excuse me. I found out about the fight on a Wednesday. That Saturday, we were flying out to Ireland. You know what I mean? It's just, it's crazy, like that fast. And that was one of the coolest experiences of my life. My teammate walks out to fight, and the whole place, they're all booing him, right? Of course. And then James, his music starts playing, and the whole arena in Ireland, they stand up on their feet. They all start singing his walkout song. Dude, it was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The Irish fans were crazy. Now, we weren't getting the love. We were getting the hate, but it's still cool. It's still cool. Sometimes it's cool to be the hated ones, like to be the bad guy. That's why I like fighting people in their hometowns, you get the booze and this and that, and then it's fun to go out there and then upset the crowd too in a way. But it was so cool. So my point is to fight Connor, if that's how it was when James fought, man, to fight Connor in Ireland would be amazing. And then to go out there and beat him there. But then to fight him in Hawaii, you know, especially since the UFC's never been there, I would love that. But then you talk about like, man, anybody of all time, like, dude, it'd be cool to go fight Bruce, you know, or like to fight like Anderson Silva in his prime. Like, how fun would that be, you know? But I would say right now, given the circumstances and the current state of the sport, to have a big money fight against Connor in Ireland or Hawaii, I think would be fun. And stylistically, I think it'd be a fun matchup as well.
Hawaii one would be really fun, but you could actually do a fight island to do an outdoor fight.
Yeah.
I think would be really cool about Hawaii. And as you're saying there about the Irish fans, I remember Artem was fighting in Belfast in the Odyssey Arena, and Connor was just in his corner, and the whole place was just going mental just because he was there. And that was just a crazy experience. If you ever manage to get the Ireland and manage to get Connor on a card, push for the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. It's an outdoor arena, about 60-seater. Or 60,000 seater, sorry, not 60. It'd be mad if 60 people went to a Connor fight.
Yeah, I'm like, man, that sounds like the Apex Center.
Yeah. That'd be really cool. But another question.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Real quick. It's funny that you say it because Connor was he was at, what was it? Is it the O3 Arena in Ireland? Is that what it's called?
It might be the E. Is it the E Arena now? I can't remember. I know they've changed the name.
Okay.
And there is a mobile phone company over home called 3, and I think it might have been 3 previously. I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah,
it was that. Yeah, so Connor was sitting there cage side when we fought. When we went out there to fight James, and yeah, dude, the whole thing was just wild. Like, dude, it was unlike anything that I had ever experienced in an MMA fight. The closest thing to that I would say was the very first UFC that I went to was UFC 94. It was when BJ Penn fought GSP for the second time. It was champion versus champion. And I don't know if you remember that, but they did the UFC prime times. Like, it was the first time they did the UFC prime times, which are kind of like the equivalent of like the embeddeds now, but they were called prime times back in the day. And dude, the hype, I had never been more excited for anything in my entire life. And the hype between that fight and the trash talk between like the, GSP and BJ Penn and the two camps. Oh, and then Hawaii versus Canada. Dude, it was just wild. And so the crowd went just ape shit, man, when GSP and BJ Penn started walking out. In fact, I've never seen anything, even to this day, during the prelims, they were chanting GSP and BJ Penn during the prelim fights, because that's how much excitement there was about that main event. So that was the only other event that I went to, which was like as wild as the stadium in Ireland. And it's just my dream to fight in front of a crowd with that much energy, man. It's just, you have to kind of experience it, man, to really understand that feeling. But it was like none other. It's amazing.
I would love to experience it. It's on my bucket list, is to been to a UFC event here in Vancouver, but I would love to get the one in Vegas. I've been to a boxing fight in Vegas. Carl Frampton from Northern Ireland fought Leo Santa Cruz in Vegas, title fight, and got down to that one. It was great. I would love to get the UFC event in Vegas. It's big on my bucket list. You've mentioned a bit about Hawaii there, and what I want to ask about is someone submitted this question, and I kind of reworded it and added to it. And we'll probably finish with this one because it's something that really interests me. When you see Max Holloway, and then you look at other guys from Hawaii, Kai Kamaka, and you've got Ty Gorder and a lot of that stuff. Is there a lot of backing between each other, between the Hawaiian fighters to go on and do well? Because it's something I've noticed a lot, and it's growing in the UFC and in MMA. And over the last number of years is the number of Hawaiian fighters. You've Brad Tavares as well in there, and a lot of guys from Hawaii are finally getting the recognition that they've deserved.
Yeah, now you have Puna in there as well. Yeah. And it's man, it's amazing, dude. It's awesome to see. There's so much pride that Hawaiians have, and we want to see each other do well. We want to see each other succeed. And so dude, it's awesome. It's awesome when I watched Kai make his UFC debut. And Kai is somebody, we've been on similar paths. We're actually managed by the same management company, Sucker Punch. And he was fighting for LFA, And in fact, before his last fight in LFA, he hit me up and he was like, "Hey, dude, so like, how are they doing?" Because I had just fought like 2 weeks prior or whatever, and he was like, "Hey, man, like, how are they doing things, and what's the weight cut situation like, and do they have warm up rooms and everything?" He was hitting me up to ask me about my experience with LFA before he fought in LFA, so it was really cool. We were both fighting for LFA, and then to watch him get the call up, and then he makes his debut. Wins. I mean, what an incredible fight. I think they got fight of the night.
They did fight of the night and a bonus as well. Yeah.
And the bonus. Yeah, man. So it's just, dude, it was awesome. It's been awesome watching some of these guys. Puna's another one. You see these guys who have just been grinding, who make it to the top. Maki Pitolo as well, who, is in the UFC. And it's just, and then of course, Max, dude, who just, is one of the pound for pound greatest fighters of all time. In fact, his performance against Calvin Kattar, man, not only, in my opinion, do I think that was his, Max's best performance, but which is crazy because he just keeps topping himself, right? I mean, he fought Brian Ortega, and I was like, dude, that's got to be his best performance, right? I mean, just looked incredible against T-City, who's an amazing fighter. And then he just keeps outclassing himself, and he keeps breaking his own records. And not only do I think his fight against Kattar was his best performance of his career, I think that's one of the best. And again, I don't think I'm being biased, man. I think that's one of the best performances that I've ever seen from any fighter ever. The pace, the accuracy, the beating, the way he overwhelmed Kattar, his fight IQ in that fight. Yeah. The entertainment. He's talking trash. He's not even looking. He's moving his head and he's stepping offline. Kattar's over here. He's not even looking at him. I mean, dude, it was like when you watch Anderson Silva fight Forrest Griffin back in the day, and he's just like in a different. He's in the Matrix, moving and. Dude, that's how Max looked that fight. So, Hawaiians there's definitely a pride, and not only just with us fighters, but just the Hawaiian community as well, man. People on social media, there's countless of Hawaiian pages that are dedicated to just promoting local fighters and local athletes, and it's amazing to see. It's been like that even since BJ Penn was around, and it's just awesome to see how the community gets behind their own.
It really is. Like, I even remember when I spoke to Kai, I told him that I seen the video on YouTube of when he got the call to the UFC, and he's like, "Wait, what?" He didn't even see that video, so I had to send him the link. And I think it must have been his brother or someone recorded it. We did even mention Ray Cooper as well, a champion in PFL. There's so many others, but that Max Holloway fight was, Joe Rogan even said it as well. And when it's coming from Joe Rogan, who sat there, cage side for so many fights, to say that's the best performance he's ever seen, I think it just speaks volumes. And that bit where he looked away in the last round, talked a bit of trash.
And he said, I'm the best boxer in the UFC. I'm the best boxer in the UFC.
And Kattar's a boxer. He's a major, but one of the best strikers in the UFC, and that's what makes it even more crazy. And I agree with you. I think Max Holloway just keeps topping his own performances, and people keeps, we talk about John Jones, we talk about GSP, we talk about some of these other people. I think Max Holloway has entered that conversation. I know maybe has a couple of more losses than maybe, some of the other guys, but he's jumped up in weight. He's took weight cuts. So there's some of those decisions which were crazy. People have called him the uncrowned champion, which I agree with. Another thing we talked about decisions earlier as well.
I was going to say the same. In fact, when I made that video, the video that I was talking to you about earlier, when I was talking about the judges, I had fought and I lost a split decision fight against Bruno Souza. You out here, brother? Yeah. Good to see you, man. And that was when I lost a split decision fight that I completely thought that I won. The next day is when Max lost that decision against Volkanovski. And then I ended up making a video. I recorded and posted a video, and I put it out on that Sunday because I was like, man, between my split decision loss and between, Max's loss, which I completely thought that Max won that fight and should be champion right now. That was actually when I made that video. That was such a horrible decision, man. I think that Max, again, you said it best, the uncrowned champion. I couldn't agree more.
It's one of those crazy ones where I'm genuinely thinking the UFC, they'll never say this, I think the UFC want Ortega to win this title fight because the Ortega Max rematch will be so good because how good the first one was. Because, to do the third fight again, knowing with a wink that Max has won the second one, there's nothing really else for Max to do. He has to fight for the title next. And I think to do a third fight, considering, I think it writes itself if should he win. But I think Ortega Holloway for me is the more intriguing fight, just for the pure fun and spectacle of it.
Yeah, I think so. But man, I do not see that fight going any differently than the first one.
Yeah, likewise. I just want to watch it again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that Ortega would have to just be desperate. I mean, desperately looking for the takedown. And that's the thing, dude. Max has great takedown defense, so it's not going to be as easy as, all he's got to do is take down Max. I think if it were that simple, Ortega would have done that in the first fight, right? You know, but it really is. It's difficult. Max has really good hips, and he's hard to take down. I just see it being, honestly, I see it being another one-sided. I think Max pieces him up, honestly. And Ortega's an incredible fighter, but there are levels to this game. There are levels to striking, and if Ortega can't get it to the ground, it's going to be a striking battle. And Max is he's just on a different level, man.
Yeah, totally agree. I've kept you all day, and I could actually keep you for another hour because it's just fun. But
yeah, this has been a blast.
Just to wrap up, what piece of advice would you give any young person, maybe on the amateur circuit, trying to go pro? If you could give any one piece of advice to someone.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say find a team, right? And that could be not just an MMA team, which of course that's very important, but a team, a group of people, whether it's family that you trust or whether it's just a close group of friends that you trust. And then of course your coaches and teammates. Find a group that you trust. That's going to, not a group of yes men, but people that are going to tell you how it is. They're going to tell you what you need to hear, not always what you want to hear, and stick close with them. Also, you have to, if this is what you want to do, and anything in life, whether you want to be an actor or a musician, whether you want to be a lawyer or a doc, you have to, if this is what you want to do, you have to dedicate your life to it. You cannot have one foot in and one foot out. You know, you got to be willing to sacrifice your social life. You have to be willing to sacrifice your job and maybe even currently your financial situation, and be okay with struggling for a little bit to be able to make this work. And everything that you do has to go into this. Find a group of people that you love and trust, and then you need to dedicate yourself. Don't sell yourself short by being halfway in. You know, you got to make the mental commitment on your own and take this, to really take this thing as far as you can. So if you want to make it an MMA, do that. Find a good team and be all in and make it happen.
So, signed advice as my little 6-month-old puppy decides he wants to be a co-anchor on the podcast. Signed advice. And as we're wrapping up, we didn't even get to it, but been such a great conversation. The king of the triangle choke, by the way, Kamuela Kirk, the Jawaiian. You're on Instagram, Twitter at the Jawaiian. If anyone wants to connect with you, that's Hawaiian with a J.
Correct.
Jawaiian, am I right?
Correct. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. If anyone, if you want to hit me up on social media at the Jawaiian, shoot me a message, whatever. I try to engage with a lot of people, you know, so yeah, hit me up and say what's up.
This has been a fantastic conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have. It's been a great pleasure for me to sit here as a fan, as someone that just wants to get to know you a bit better, and hopefully that the listeners, they find out a bit more about you and we see what great things happen in the rest of 2021 for you. Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate you reaching out, man. I'm really happy that we were able to make this happen. Like we said earlier, it had been a month maybe that we've been trying to, and it was well worth the wait, man.